Thank you so much for this kind introduction. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the organizers for the kind invitation. How are you today? Oh, you still did not wake up. Okay, we have an interesting topic to wake you up. Let's see how you feel at the end of this presentation. We will be talking about, is AI coming in peace? And I want to start first by introducing myself, and you heard this bio, and that I'm having so many different hats that I will not be repeating now. But what I also want to say is, our dear moderator pronounced my surname properly, which is Panic. I was born in Serbia, in Belgrade. But in English, this actually looks like Panic. And they say it's a perfect surname to have when you are talking about artificial intelligence today. So I also want to see at the end of the presentation, will we be in a panic mode, or maybe I bring a little bit of optimism to the conversation of AI and peace. And I want to start with this. I enlarge this as a big AI because I see it often as this big elephant in the room. Everybody are talking about this. And I wanted to start with some of my favorite quotes from the time when I actually started the organization AI for Peace. I lived in California, in the Silicon Valley, where this was quite a hype in this bubble. The world, this was around 10 years ago, the world was not interested that much about artificial intelligence, but this bubble in California was talking about AI as the single biggest technology revolution the world has ever seen. Or, this one is my favorite, AI will not only be a game changer, but it will disrupt the entire playing field. And probably the most famous quote by Stephen Hawking, that AI is likely to be either the best or the worst thing to happen to humanity. Not an easy thing. I see some of your reactions on the quote. Not an easy thing to leave us with, but I still think it's a sort of motivational one because it's still in our hands to decide. Now, to go 10 years after, outside of this Silicon Valley bubble, and to see what is the reality today, I decided for the very early Monday morning, present some of the graphs, but I promise this will be quickly, bear with me, some of the data from the latest Stanford University Human-Centered AI 2025 AI Index report. So let's see what the data is telling us where AI is currently now. And here we can see the comparison of different AI model performance in comparison with the human performance and intelligence. You see this flat line of a human baseline, and then some of the models on image classification, reading comprehension, language understanding, visual reasoning. You see that in some of these models are actually beating the AI level intelligence. The number of AI medical devices approved by the FDA is increasing. We see this almost exponential increase from 2015 or 16 to the last year. And then this especially increased between 2022 and 2023. Another increasing curve, number of mentions on AI in legislative proceedings in 75 covered countries and geographical areas is also increasing. So the regulators are catching up as well and trying to understand that this is something that we need to figure out how to govern, how to regulate properly. Number of AI patents in the world is also increasing. Between 2010 and 2023, the number of AI patents has grown and significantly even ballooning, this report is saying, between the latest data that we have between 2022 and 2023. Now, with all of these applications, so in the previous 10 years, there was a lot of developments of AI in the science, and what we have seen in this more recent history covered in this report is that we are now seeing the applications of this science in the real life. With the increase of applications, the risks are increasing as well. So the number of reported AI incidents from 2012 to 2024 also increased. We have this record high number between only in between 2 years of 56.4% of an increase. And we can debate this as well. Is this a factual increase, or we are actually just measuring more? This is maybe for the Q&A and the discussion after this. What is evident from this as well is that researchers and science is also being more interested in covering the risks in AI incidents. So this is another interesting information from the report, that a number of responsible AI papers accepted at selected AI conferences is also increasing. The private investments as well. I picked this specifically on generative AI because generative AI in a way brought this conversation closer to all of us, where we see that private investment increased 18.17% from 2023. And why I'm mentioning this, because here I'm going to stop with the graphs and data and try to bring this closer to the real life. And I want to just present how this conversation of AI suddenly moved from big institutions, big universities that actually had resources to deal with this, like MIT's or Harvard or Stanford. The AI suddenly became something that we have been discussing in our own homes as well. And I'm using the Google Trend Score just to demonstrate this. So Google Trend Score measures how popular a certain topic is when we try to search it online. And this information is showing us that in 2022, AI had a Google Trend Score of just 11, with 0 being not searched at all, and 100 indicating that something is really a popular topic out there. And then in 2023, AI surged in Google Trend to 100. So what happened? Generative AI, right? ChatGPT, other generative tools started being published there, and suddenly this became a conversation not only scientists were having, but we were having with our kids, with our parents. In our everyday lives, this started being something that we became interested in. This is another curiosity that I wanted to share to also try to break the ice and wake us up a bit on where AI currently is. And for those of you who are interested in following the Nobel Prizes, last year, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded for foundational discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks to these two gentlemen, one of them being Geoffrey Hinton. Remember this name. He's considered the godfather of AI, a person who is really deciding in a way, who has been deciding in the past and now trying to guide us in this future with artificial intelligence. And just for this occasion, I went back to X to check how the general population is actually, or maybe even scientific population, is commenting on this. So you see some of the comments that I picked up here. Physics and machine learning, do we live in a simulation? I can only imagine the pain of physicists. How is it possible that the Nobel Prize in Physics is awarded to somebody who is not even a physicist? Was this decision made by ChatGPT? This is my favorite one. So quite an interesting new reality we are living in. And then, as if the pain was not big enough, only one day after, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry has been awarded to these three gentlemen for computational protein design and for protein structure prediction, again, for AI research. And why I'm also saying this, because it really created an in-depth conversation about where is this role of AI in science and in other disciplines as well. And I'm picking up a quote from a colleague, Virginia Dignum, who is a professor at the university in Sweden, who is saying that this is actually a triumph of interdisciplinarity. The real breakthroughs in science are no longer the domain of a single discipline, but require a broad perspective and the combination of different insights. And I really think this is a quote that we need to remember and to try to understand in which type of reality this new AI that is interdisciplinary with everything else, including peace, we will see soon, is taking us to. So today, AI is everywhere and it is transforming our societies. So what about AI and peace? And several years ago, before this hype around ChatGPT, one of the previous, more older models, GPT-3, this language generator was introduced in a conversation with people who actually asked this question, the question that we gave to this lecture today: is AI coming in peace? And also I'm using the same one to write a newsletter on some of these conversations on how AI intersects with peace. And if you were worried until now, don't be. The GPT-3 is convincing you that, yes, also quoting Stephen Hawking, that this can be either the best or the worst thing to happen to humanity. Machines are coming in peace. But joke aside, some of the serious conversations were happening by some of the scientists in the field. And those are some of the titles from the newspapers you can see basically on an everyday basis, right? This conversation about AI that is potentially bringing us to so-called existential risks, not only endangering the peace, but even the entire existence of our humanity. How could AI destroy humanity? AI that could wreak a terrible harm. It must be controlled. Another big name in the field, Stuart Russell. This is his quote. AI that could wipe out humanity. AI risks leading humanity to extinction, and so on. And now in my lectures, I removed this conversation about existential risks for years now. We did not consider this as a reality at all. And just for this occasion, I'm kind of bringing it back because of some of the latest conversations that are happening in the field. But to remind ourselves about the time when this was a big conversation, this was a quote that I'm picking during pandemic, during COVID, by one of the biggest scientists, computer scientists in the field, Roman Yampolsky, who is saying that if a virus with IQ level 0 can make this amount of damage, right, COVID, imagine what a virus with level intelligence 1,000 can do. This is this level of super intelligence that this group of scientists is considering as a big threat to humanity. Joshua Bengio, another big name in the field, joining this conversation, also saying that now we are nowhere close to the super intelligence. Again, don't worry. But maybe in a year or 5 years, we actually don't know. This is the real quote of Joshua Bengio. Now, to pick two more big names in the field, one on the right side, just to show how the entire field is actually disagreeing about the entire conversation about superintelligence and so-called existential risks. On the right side, you see the chief AI scientist at Meta, who is saying that human-level AI systems are going to take a long time. Maybe they don't ever happen. So this is one camp, in a way, that is just not considering this as a reality. And then the other voice that became quite a popular, I'm quite sure that everybody in the room now know about this name, that 10 years ago did not exist in conversations around AI at all. This is the OpenAI CEO, Sam Altman, who a couple of months ago said that AI systems that can do any task a human can will be developed in a, and this is a quote, reasonably close-ish future. Now, I'm picking this up now because just yesterday I read Sam Altman's post on his personal website where he's making this big announcement that OpenAI reached the level of superintelligence. The models that they've been developing, the level of intelligence that they are showing, this is this slow, not maybe that slow, actually I would say very quick transition to these models. So let's pay attention what's next that is coming from OpenAI. But to just show a little bit of more equalized conversations about AI as well, I wanted to show a group of other scientists and experts in the field who are really advocating that we need to move from existential risks to so-called AI harms. AI stands for actual harms. Instead of thinking what can or maybe not come in the close or far future, let's see what are the actual impacts of AI now, and try to see how we can reveal these harms, stop, prevent them, and actually repair the harm that is being created by these systems now. And just try to catch up the distinction between these two groups. I don't think it's also accidental that this group are mostly women, because so many of these tools were showing bigger harms to this group of population. So what about us? AI for Peace, when we started dealing with this conversation and this intersection, what we realized is, and just understand this was 10 years ago when we started the organization, we did a research with this intersection, and we realized that military uses of AI are multiple and advanced. So even at that time, and now the investment in military and defense are much, much bigger than then. But at that time, it was the amounts of investments and applications of AI were in warfare platforms, situational awareness, threat monitoring, simulation and training, in healthcare as well, battlefield healthcare, and autonomous weapon systems, the so-called killer robots. I'm sure everybody in the room heard about this conversation. This was a big topic for the 10 years, and now we see the revival in a way of this conversation as well, with the war in Ukraine, with how we see the drones are actually being used in a modern warfare, and countries following up these investments, not only in defense and military, but specifically technology and AI in military. What we also realized is that exploring and utilizing of AI in peace building is very limited. So what we decided to do is actually look at this gap and try to see what does it mean to employ or deploy or develop different AI tools in peace building. And we see this as a strategic activity to solidify peace, to, if possible, avoid violent conflict, avoid wars, to provide the tools for building something more than just the absence of war, so work on building the positive peace, and strengthen capacities for conflict management, lay the foundations for sustainable peace and development. And with this, AI for Peace is really an organization that is trying to build bridges between these two groups of stakeholders and actors. So we talk with peace builders, our founders, our advisory board are mostly practitioners who are coming from conflict or post-conflict areas, peace builders or humanitarian actors. So we wanted them to be more informed about AI, to demystify this technology for them so that they can actually be ready to speak up and to act with or sometimes against this technology as well when we see that the risks are big. And we also talk with AI and data scientists, and we want them to become peace builders themselves. We want them to commit to using AI in sustaining peace. So we also acknowledge that this is not a completely new development. It's a sort of a continuation of a tradition of peace tech or digital peace building. So peace builders, since the invention of the first technologies, were trying to see how and if and when technologies can be a sort of a additional tool in their peace builders' toolbox to actually advance their work. And this is how we see this entire umbrella or tools under the AI umbrella, and which of these tools can actually be useful for peace builders. we were asking two main questions: why AI and why now? And it was evident at that point that AI is becoming something that is more approachable to organizations like ourselves, a small think tank, a small civil society organization without resources of the states like United States or resources like Harvard, because of the availability of data, advancements in machine learning, natural language processing, open sourcing of so many of these models. We actually, and many other actors in this ecosystem, started being able using this technology for peace. And the other question is why peace and why now? And I think for this audience in the room is not even necessary to, not even audience in this room, I think it's enough today to open the newspapers just to understand how crucial it is to deal with this conversation of peace and conflict today. Just to remind us about some of these urgent data that we are receiving from the field, that 2024 was marked by unprecedented turmoil with new conflicts erupting and existing crises intensifying. And here I'm sharing just a couple of points that we picked from the recent reports from the field, from organizations like ACLED or Institute for Economics and Peace, really sending these alarming messages that over the past 5 years, conflict levels have nearly doubled, and political violence events increased by 25% compared to 2023. And ACLED is also doing some of the forecasting of the future conflict, saying that in the beginning of this year, conflict event rates are expected to grow by 15%. There are currently 56 active conflicts, actually a bit more now. Unfortunately, we see with new conflicts happening in the first 6 months of this year, which is the most since the end of the Second World War. And with fewer conflicts being resolved either militarily or through peace agreements. So this is really worrying information. Also realizing and understanding that conflicts are evolving much faster than our ability to understand them and address them, where many scientists are actually seeing the potentials of AI, of maybe helping us to understand how these conflicts are changing. The protracted nature of conflicts are also increasing most quickly in middle-income states and states that introduce some democratic practices. It's not only related to state weaknesses and fragility, something that we were intensively working on in the previous decade is also changing. Now, what is also important to realize, not only numbers around conflicts, but impacts that these conflicts are creating. And here it's also a review of some of the reports showing this number. Every year we update the numbers of forcibly displaced people, which is increasing. The number of children, nearly 1 in 5 children globally are living in or fleeing conflict zones. An estimated 305 million people will require urgent humanitarian assistance. And what I'm sure all of us followed intensively is not only increasing demands and impacts of conflicts and crises, but also the decreasing amounts of resources that we have to tackle with them. So this is another alarming information coming from the latest global humanitarian overview that required 49 billion for this humanitarian appeal, and less than 50% was actually answered. So this is another element where organizations are trying to see, is there something that technology can help in sending early warnings and actually providing an earlier action so that less resources is also needed to tackle some of these crises. Another one, the scale and pace of funding cuts have been described as seismic shocks to the humanitarian system, prompting the UN top relief official to warn that it is reaching a breaking point. So peace is in urgent need of allies today, and we are asking, can AI actually be one of them? With our mission as an organization and the vision to create a future in which AI benefits peace, security, and sustainable development, and where diverse voices influence creation of AI and related technologies. And when we started this work, this is the mapping that I did at New York University Technology as a fellow, as a research fellow there at the Center on International Cooperation, where we try to see, to map the entire ecosystem of data for peace and prevention and to see who are the organizations out there that are utilizing technology for peace building or conflict prevention, and additionally for which type of work and which type of technologies they're using in this. So this is just a quick overview that gave us a signal, not only what has been currently used at that time, but what has the potential in a way to be helpful for this field in the future. So hate speech monitoring, conflict prevention, human rights protection, sentiment analysis, mediation and peacemaking, peacekeeping, we heard in the introduction today, civilian protection, accountability in war, human rights protection, and so on and so on. And then several years after, we did a sort of a review in the field and captured the actual projects and organizations. So this is the book that was mentioned in the introduction, AI for Peace, that is giving an overview of different tools and projects that are specifically applied for some of these tools. And I want to mention just some of these projects as a sort of introduction to the field, but also a sort of a motivation for us to think in which direction these technologies can be used in a, I would say, positive way with this agenda of sustaining peace. And we can also debate if this is the result that these tools are actually creating, hopefully maybe later in the panel discussion as well. One of the biggest names in the field coming from academia, I'm sure anybody who is dealing with conflict early warning, early action knows about the Violence and Impact Early Warning System coming from Uppsala University and Peace Research Institute, Oslo, which is predicting conflict-related fatalities 36 months in advance, and many are debating, is this actually enough? Is it too much in the future or not enough in the future? We can also debate that. And then the system has been traditionally first using the more traditional statistical data, such as the one by UCDP, and then using this new organization, ACLE data, which just several years ago started picking, actually providing a complete overview of the entire world and conflicts, data on conflicts and conflict-related violence, including the data on population, socioeconomic factors, migration, and climate. Now, there has been quite some advances in the field as well. In the last 5 years, a lot of other organizations started utilizing textual data as well, understanding that statistical data is not complete for many of the countries, especially when we talk about conflict areas. We don't have access to these areas. Sometimes it's not safe. So we were trying to find alternatives, and these organizations are finding these alternatives in the online spaces as well, including using the field human monitors who are following what is actually happening in their vicinities and reporting. So that this organization, for example, ACLE, grew up from just collecting the data, it's a huge effort, not just, to actually building this entire prediction model tool, right? It's called Conflict Alert System, similar to the previous one, trying to give monthly forecast of organized armed conflict 6 months into the future, and then on top of that, providing some of the other explainability of the tools and trying to make them more human-centered and oriented so they can be useful as a helpful, not as a replacement for experts in a certain conflict area, but as a, again, helping tool in their work. Another one, just to shout out to our colleagues from Barcelona on conflict forecast, another tool that is using this database of more than 5 million continuously updated newspapers today. So this is publicly available data, not only in English language, in different local languages. What is being published in the news is being picked up to see if the machine learning can actually be trained to recognize if there are certain signals coming from these newspapers that have been published on a daily level, and if this can be used as a sort of a red flag signal for certain areas and things that are happening in those areas. Now, just to make a distinction, this one is very important for me as I myself I'm coming from a conflict area. So some of these tools, as you can see from the previous examples, are built more for policymakers for different governments, ministries, so they can create a certain policy action, or for humanitarian actors to prepare humanitarian relief on time. And some of these early action or early warning, early action tools are built for citizens themselves. So this specific example is called Sentry app, developed by Hala System. It was an example from Syria done in other conflict areas as well that were under heavy bombardment, trying to train the sounds to, or models on sound of the airplanes to recognize when actually the attack is being prepared, so that the citizens are giving, through the app, this signal of try to find a shelter. And you may ask why there are systems that can actually do that. They are often not functional or not providing the warning early enough. So this has been proven as a life-saving tool for citizens in conflict areas. The second big topic for the peace builders is this entire hate speech monitoring and applications of technologies. And now if you look in the book, you'll see that we are actually covering this from two angles, because we are quite aware that algorithms have a sort of a harmful role as well in spreading the hate speech, misinformation, disinformation. So we are researching deeply into that. What is the role of the technology in social media or in other aspects in spreading the harm, but also looking at this again proactively, positive role. Can these tools be helpful to peace builders to actually predict and prevent some of the harms that are results of the hateful speech? And I'm picking this one as a sort of a reminder that hate speech is not something new that we are dealing, unfortunately, as a society. Even before Rwandan genocide, I'm just picking this one and Srebrenica as well, because we are marking it's now the 30 years, right? Am I counting this? Well, the 30 years anniversary since Rwanda, and this year it will be Srebrenica as well. And then to see how actually even 30 years later, we are dealing with the same, but much more complicated challenge in the hate speech, because what we witnessed in 2017, this is this example of Facebook inciting violence and ethnic cleansing in Myanmar, where we see how algorithms and social media are now being implicated into this. Now with the actual evidence from these companies as well. So this is a case of a whistleblower from a couple of years ago who was for years collecting the documents from Meta and published all of these documents, testified in Congress to show that these platforms and algorithms being used are unquestionably making hate worse for different reasons, including the ones that we are actually not covering all of the languages, not able to monitor the hate speech out there. And the quote from a whistleblower that situations in what I mentioned, Myanmar, later happened in Ethiopia, now happening in other conflict areas as well, is just the opening chapters of a story so terrifying that no one wants to read the end of it. So because of this, we started, and these platforms as well started looking into the same technology. Can actually the same type of monitoring and tools be useful to understand when and where hate speech is appearing, and then moderating this type of content? Now, for those of you who are following changes with the change of government and new government in US, you probably saw a lot of changes happening with the companies and social media in the commitment of moderating the hate speech, but we are not quitting, right? Civil society and many other organizations out there in conflict areas are still working diligently in trying to understand the value of these tools. This is one of the projects that we have been doing in Sri Lanka on automated detection of hate speech, working with traditional peace builders, organizations who were manually monitoring what is happening in the conversations, in dialogue in their communities, and trying to train them to build and use these kind of automation tools, because they simply felt overwhelmed for different reasons, for the amount, for scale and speed of spreading the hate speech online, but also for the fact that doing this job manually is very harmful, right? Continuously reading and seeing photos with a harmful speech or harmful images is something that nobody wants to be doing. So training these tools to help and take over some of that work in the future, this is what we have been doing. Some of the organizations, again, just for the motivation, have been doing this even with step further, not only understanding where the hate speech is happening online, but redirecting this content towards resources, education, and support group, basically repurposing algorithms that are giving us advertisements for something, algorithms that are trying to sell us something, for offering individuals the chance to speak with a counselor instead of promoting a product to be bought. And the third and the last one that I will mention here is this application, again, or the intersection, rather, I will say, between AI and human rights protection, where we are again looking into, this is the where the most of the attention in the field went, of how AI is actually harming the human rights. And we saw that intensively in the EU as well, when the EU AI Act was negotiated and written. And now what we are trying to do is, Peace Builders, is also look, okay, can actually some of these tools be useful for the human rights protection? Those are some of the harms, but those are some of the potential positive applications. Helping in human rights investigations, helping with verifying, assessing, and monitoring the consequences of war, to assess the damage of war, to track the population displacement, or even to track the fire detection. And now there are many possible applications where machine learning, or especially computer vision or object detection, is using so much content that we are having. Not only this example here is from satellite imagery, but imagine this entire movement 15 or 20 years ago, I don't know when we actually started using smartphones, this entire movement of digital witnesses has been created, including in conflict zones, where everybody with our own phones are able to just record what is happening around us without knowing actually what is happening. So this is where machine learning and models have been trained to recognize if there is any evidence of violations of human rights. For example, utilization. This project is around utilization of cluster munition, and can we find evidence of the use of cluster munition in conflict zones, which is against the international law, right? And then the last one is also looking into how the human rights, or how not only can AI be an enabler for human rights work, as I was trying to show now, but also how the human rights themselves can create models for better and more rights-sensitive AI. And this is this entire conversation that is happening not only about the importance of AI ethics and data responsibility, but also trying to understand that human rights framework or frameworks can be useful to ensure that this work is being done in a responsible way. This is something that we encountered very early in the AI for Peace work. Some of the risks and ethical constraints that we need to be aware of in this work: sensitivity of data, privacy, protection of vulnerable populations. Our work concentrates a lot around do no harm and conflict sensitivity tools, which for Peace Builders in the room, you will be familiar about these concepts that we have been traditionally using in our work. Now we are trying to see how and if these tools can be upgraded for the algorithmic age, for the AI age, right? And understand, can we actually repurpose them for the AI-related work? We, in one moment, even pause the building of the tools, realizing that we first need to have ethical frameworks. So this one is publicly available, the guide for practitioners out there for anybody working at the intersection of AI for peace, how this work can be done in an ethical and do no harm manner. So after all of this, there are other things at the intersection of AI and peace that we are covering, and I am inviting you to look at all of the papers and books that I mentioned there as a sort of a motivation. But just to conclude at the end that seeing at all of this, starting from existential risks and mentioning all of the potential positive applications, I do want to finish with one of my favorite quotes, and maybe answering to Stephen Hawking's legacy that he left with us, that we are not going to get the future we dream or the one that we fear, but the one that we plan for. So I hope, and I know that this event is contributing to us planning for this better future, and I just want to thank you all for being here, listening, and hopefully being part of this plan for the better AI future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this very interesting and comprehensive keynote on AI and peace building. I have a lot of questions in my head. Unfortunately, you will be part of the podium after the break. But for now, are there any questions in your heads you would like to ask Branka before we head to the next keynote? Please. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The identity of business and politics is always competition. And there are always two sides of looking at something. You talk all the time of things to prevent what? The other ones want it. So with your technology and AI, all this, you're in fact increasing the competition that is a natural element of our identity, our humans, you know? We're always better than the neighbor, or quicker than the other car, or whatever. You cut that out. I think with handling all this, we become pretty boring people. You know, think about it. I'm not predicting anything or saying, well, thank you very much for all the things. I will walk out naked because I won't have any plans anymore. You know, I'll be totally brave and goody-goody, you know? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that type of a boring future, I have to say. This is really my goal. If that boring future means people not losing lives in wars, I'm absolutely for that type of competition. I would prefer if world has more competition around peace. Can you imagine if you're competing to be more peaceful and to actually be more successful in having dialogues and sitting at the table than actually waging wars? I don't mind having that type of boring future, and this is the goal of this. What I'm more afraid is that the world, and which is quite shocking and surprising for me, that even in 21st century, world is more prone to weapons competition rather than dialogue competition, and this is what I hope to change with the work of AI for peace.
Thank you for that vision. I think we all now have a goal, and we have a next question.
Yes, thank you. My name is Victoria Wolf. I'm the Deputy Ambassador of the Spanish Embassy here in Vienna. Thank you so much for a very, very inspiring keynote speech. That was really a good start, a good kickoff for the Monday morning. I would have a couple of questions, actually. You spoke from very much from a North Atlantic perspective or US perspective, but also bringing in some European inputs. But I would like to know your approach, or your assessment about what Europe is doing in terms of AI with the AI Act that was approved, and I have to say that under the Spanish presidency in 2023 and entering into force not so long ago. So your assessment on that. And my second question is about early warning, early action. The problem, I was involved in early warning in Brussels for a long time. And the problem in Brussels is about the political will for early action. But I think it's all over the world. It's not only in Brussels because of this very big machinery that is the EU. But so how would we push for early action, and how can we take into account the triple nexus about peace, humanitarian action, and development action? And what I was missing, if I may, was the development action also in prevention, because development actors are I would say, the first ones to grasp the risk in any region, that they are feeling that there is a tension between communities at grassroots level. Yeah. So 3 questions at the end. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Vivo en México ahora. I live in Mexico now, so for me it's actually surprising to hear that I cover North Atlantic. I have to think about that carefully. I usually talk from the perspective of global and try to represent voices of Global South. And mostly, as you maybe caught up from the presentation, organizations on the ground as well, but I do advise other governments and organizations. So I'll speak about that as well, not in my role as an advisor. In my personal role, I can commend that what has been happening with the EU AI Act has different types of reactions, both inside and outside of the Europe. The entire conversation now is around this tension between innovation and regulation, right? And this fear, basically, especially, again, I think it's not an accident why this is happening now after the new administration in US that also changed their attitudes in a way towards regulation, basically wiping out some of the legacies of previous administration and concentration on regulation and governance of these systems. So the EU reacted on that, and we just had a conversation around this before the session around what France announced, and in general the European Union as a new investments in the technology at the EU, at the Paris AI Action Summit, really trying to send this message that we need to, or Europe needs to catch up in innovation, right? Needs to invest more. We see huge investments fund being opened in this regard. Even what has been framed in the very Macron speech at the opening of the summit as we need to see how we can reframe the EU AI Act so that startups, the innovation system can be more free to act. And this is the process that is currently the conversation that is currently being made. As a voice, to take a hat from the Global South voice or global majority, I'm just coming from a working visit to Brazil, and I can also share that some of the other countries, similar how GDPR had an effect on other countries in data protection, the AI Act has a similar impact. Brazil was one of the countries that took it as a sort of a model. It's their law now that is being negotiated is even considered as a Brazilian or Latin American EU or AI Act. They are in panic, I have to say this. So they are just trying to understand what is happening in Europe and why we are switching this concentration from governance to innovation. So this was maybe a longer answer to the first question. The second one, completely agree and we can talk in the panel more about this on early warning and how governments are actually, not only governments, other organizations as well. This is a sort of weak spot of early warning systems because there is a huge gap between warning and action. It's not about the accuracy of some of these tools or even accuracy of human, like ministries of foreign affairs, right, or ministries of defense had these entire teams looking into situational awareness or forecasting. They had human forecasters. Where we were lagging is always the political action. One of the first projects I did on algorithms was at the World Bank. We were building the tool to predict the probability of famine happening in conflict areas. And we thought, okay, this should not be, I mean, we were pretty naive, right, that this is not a political. Of course it is, because famines are in conflict areas, man-made. But the idea was that we want to receive earlier signals when certain population will be in extreme hunger or famine, so that the humanitarian action is being provided earlier. And even that was a political decision, like putting because it's funding, right? The countries were blocking of what has been happening. And there are certain conversations now about a new wave of technology, and we will talk about this in the next panel discussion, the agentic AI, and if some of these decisions are actually automatic. We see the UK government, the new Prime Minister, taking a completely new stand towards AI tools in different ministries. So will this be a future of actually having more automated actions and then solving this political blockade and gap? It's just left to be seen. Was there another one? Sorry, did I miss something? Yeah, well, that's a very interesting one, because some of these tools are actually now experimenting exactly on that. Instead of building on the data exclusively from conflicts, actually picking the development data. And this is an interesting new development that we are going to see if the signals are actually more accurate, starting from the same premise. Can actually the development data, the agencies in Germany, for example, picking up the GIZ, the projects, the things that people are picking on the ground, including the specific projects that we are developing on the ground, can they actually show more accurate signals than waiting for the violence to actually spike out to get that early warning? Yeah.
It's good to see that there are a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we are reaching the end of the discussion time. I see one question over there and two questions over there. Please, let's try to keep it. Yeah, we
do have a panel discussion. I'll be in.
Yeah, you'll be around for the panel discussions, and we will have opportunity to go deeper into all these questions. Ladies first.
Hi, I hope this is a quick question. So AI is really dual or even multiple use. Don't you think that before we can use AI for peace, we need to have safeguards in place and bans on using AI for military purposes?
Okay, thank you. I would like to collect the three questions in order, if that's okay for you,
yes,
to give a wrap-up answer. There's one question over there. Yeah.
Try to be brief. I'm Michael Lebisch, historian in Vienna. Let's come to hate speech. I'm not in support of Elon Musk that anything goes, but is AI already that good to detect hate speech and not be more or less a protection against freedom speech? Because does it get the right meaning? Does it get irony? Does it really catch the right meaning? Does it really catch the right words?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
Okay. And one last question, just behind you. Yes.
It's a perfect question. I would connect to the gentleman here. My question is very quickly that the two sides of this, how can we solve on one hand that, for instance, Instagram is known as the racism app because the comment sections have been quite, well, Holocaust denial, anti-Semitic, and all those kind of vile things are happening. And on the other side, if we look at the potential of AI for, let's say, speech monitoring, if I would be an authoritarian, then this would be the dream of like the Soviet bureau. I can look at what everybody is saying, I can quickly scan, and then if somebody, I mean, there's this good example in China where there's this meme of Xi Jinping, and then they tried to put them into different pictures and hide his face, but it never worked. So they always used more software to get it over. And my question is, how can we balance those two things, especially with the kind of retreat from the liberal democracy we have seen in the last 30 years?
Thank you. Great questions. Let me take the next hour now to discuss all of this. But let's start from Rania. Thanks so much for the question. I would have to say no. I would advocate don't wait for the things on applications of AI in war, or this is why we are doing AI for peace, because I do think both things need to be done in parallel. I do see it as a huge challenge of actually tackling the use of AI in war and defense, but I also see that a lot of organizations are already doing this, right? The No Killer Robots is one of the biggest movements out there, joined by Nobel Peace Prize winners, governments, civil society organizations. I'm really convinced that we in parallel need to work on applications of AI for peace. So that's the no part for your question, but also the yes part, that we need to work on the guardrails, right? On these ethical standards in both cases. With that distinction, that I do think that in AI, in war, we need to have a clear no for so many of the applications. For AI for peace, we still need to figure out where that no is. I also think there are some applications, like what the last gentleman, sorry, I forgot, did not pick up your name. I think Europe also figured that out, right? In the surveillance systems, in biometrics, in social scoring. The similar no's will come in AI for peace in certain applications, but we need to work on both at the same time. And I'm afraid we are a bit losing the battle on the currently on the, opposing some of the applications of AI in war. Yeah. But happy to have you in our like camp, right? Please don't leave us. The hate speech, absolutely, I agree about everything. It's very challenging to work on these tools in general and then in specific countries, because the regulation is different. Now, not all of the countries are regulating either hate speech or freedom of speech. We see the differences in the United States in comparison to some other countries, like Brazil that I just mentioned, has a very much stricter attitudes to what can actually be spread online. I think what we saw as a sort of an advancement is the field is, no matter how the hate speech is regulated, accepting that in real life, some call for violence, for example, has harmful effects, and this should not be allowed, right? Call for genocide or calling for killing certain members of certain populations. So in that sense, we know, or in some contexts we do agree, in some we disagree, what is allowed, what is not. Training machines on that is very difficult. We are getting better. Where we are not getting better is catching up on malicious use. As soon as we train the model to recognize certain instances of hate speech, malicious actors figure that out. It's enough to introduce one word, one signal. Like there was a research that actually showed that just putting a heart on social media posts next to a harmful sentence tricks the model, right? Or love. Word love, call for genocide and put love after this, machine cannot catch it. Of course, humans can. So those are these instances, context as well. where machines are not yet that good. And additional challenges you mentioned, understanding, for us humans, it's also challenging to understand the context of satire or humor, or even hate speech. What is harmful, what I see as a harmful as a member of one community, the other community is not perceiving that in the same way, right? Our perceptions are different, which is why, going back to Rania's point, we need ethical instructions of how to do this, and we do have this, like how to avoid this bias, the hate speech bias, by ensuring the diversity of teams that are training the tools and labeling the content, labeling the hate speech, and so on. But it is a very, very complicated issue. And the last one that you mentioned, and absolutely I would like us all to think about this, because there is a huge risk that we slip into that dimension. And not only risk, I think we saw with Cambridge Analytica, do you remember the US elections and other countries as well, where the data, the Facebook data, was misused to nudge election results as well? We are already living through that manipulation of the online content, and in some countries even monitoring the speech to target the human rights activists, defenders, citizens. So this is a new brave world that we need to work on and to push back. I think there is a way to push back towards that. Also, I think connected with your question, was there something else, or I kind of that slipped? It's also related to the surveillance and the risk of the surveillance society. Yeah. Surveillance capitalism, right? Shoshana Zuboff has a great book on this conversation. Like, knowledge is there, our understanding of the risks is there. We just need to act on that. And again, what my hope is that I also created with this keynote is a bit of hope as well that we can take an agency. Even though it takes us to maybe more boring world, but a safer one.
Thank you very, very much.
Can I ask the last question?
Sure,
just, is AI coming in peace? Yes or no? It depends. My students always say it depends, and that's the best answer that I love.
But we don't have to take the decision now, since we'll have the opportunity to hear a lot more from you on the panel. You will get the additional hour, don't mind. But for now, thank you very, very much for that really interesting and inspiring talk and keynote. Thank you, Branka.
Thank you so much for your questions.